as usual, please look for the tasks to complete for U4L5. You can find it under assignments or on the Canvas homepage in the weekly calendar. Today is the 30th of November. December starts tomorrow. So yeah, I put up some Christmas decorations over the break as well, which is always fun to do. We'll start off usual deal in breakout rooms chatting about something. Question I'd like to throw at you today, I just posted in the chat. If you could live anywhere on this planet, where would you choose to live? Have you guys answered this before? Have we done this one? We haven't. Okay. So if you could live anywhere on this planet, where would you choose to live? And you could be very specific, like down to the address, or you could be very general, just pick a country or something like that. We'll come back together in 2 minutes for sharing. Next on the docket is homework review, I believe. Just taking a look at that, you had to, there wasn't really any homework. It was the classwork that if you didn't finish it, just kind of rolled over. So drawings look great. I think this is Gabby's, nicely done on the brain there. I think I'm gonna show off, let's look at Shay's as well here. Whoa, I moved my little viewer thing over. How did I do that? But great job here. And the Ed puzzle is looking good. Looks like most of you got through that, all about the severing the corpus callosum. So hopefully you caught on to the minimum fact, at least, that by severing the corpus callosum, what two things can't communicate with each other anymore? When you cut the corpus callosum, what two things weren't able to talk to each other anymore?
The right and left side of your brains, they couldn't, like, they're basically independent of each other.
So wasn't that crazy in the video? Like, did you all see that they like showed him these things and like his hands were able to work completely independently because they're both being controlled by separate parts of the brain? And what was the whole thing that he couldn't say one of them, but his hand could draw what it saw, and then he was able to speak it out loud after he looked at his drawing. Like, oh, to me, that's crazy. And apparently this is a pretty routine procedure for treating things like schizophrenia, or no, sorry, not schizophrenia. What do you call it when you have like epilepsy, when you've got seizures and things like that, because it's sort of a seizure is an electrical storm that goes all the way through the brain through both hemispheres. And so severing it can often calm down and prevent seizures from spreading so drastically that they have such a bad effect. But anyway, I just thought it was a cool video. That's actually something that was shown to me in grad school when I was in a graduate program at WashU in St. Louis. So any other questions or comments on that? Would any of you want your corpus callosum severed? I think it'd be cool to be able to like actually like really work with your hands independently, but otherwise I think, yeah, it would probably be a little weird. Okay, so we are gonna move on to the peripheral nervous system now that we've covered the central nervous system. Just gonna use some slides to briefly introduce you to it, and then rather than kind of just giving you another activity or talking to you, I figured why not just draw it and get into another little drawing exercise. So that's what we'll dedicate most of class time to. Again, is a kind of a drawing thing that I put together. So we'll see how that goes. But just as a quick introduction, everyone's seeing peripheral nervous system on their screen?
Yes.
So here's the breakdown that I gave you that you're hopefully becoming more and more familiar with. I'm going to sort of, we've covered the central nervous system and drawn it. Now I'd like to move on to the peripheral nervous system, which, as you can see, is a little more complex, but don't get too lost in the details, right? Motor is anything that is output, right? So think of motor as coming from the brain, being delivered to the body, and obviously sensory is the input going towards the central nervous system. Motor is where you see some interesting stuff. You've got your voluntary control stuff, that's your somatic, and then autonomic, this is the stuff we don't think about, organs functioning, heart beating, that kind of thing. And then again, you've got two systems there, two divisions, the sympathetic, parasympathetic. One is very excitatory, your fight or flight response. The other one is relaxing, right? Inhibitory, rest and digest. And that's something you'll explore more in the readings and the activity today. Nerves are actually not just, I mean, I know we've been emphasizing the whole neurons, right? And one neuron, so you've got the dendrites, long little axon, connecting to another neuron, right? We've talked about these transitions and the synapse between them, but it turns out that in reality, neurons are all packed together in these multiple layers in a protective covering called the endoneurium. That is then bundled together into what are called fascicles surrounded by what's called the perineurium. And then all of that's bundled together along with blood supply to keep all these cells alive into what's called an epineurium. And that is what you call a nerve. So just like muscles and how muscles actually have these huge bundles of cords, nerves work the same way. And it's largely for protection, right? As well as efficiency of delivering signals. But when you have your optical nerve or your auditory nerve, what it is a bundle of all these neurons that are in these protective coatings. So we're going to break the peripheral nervous system down. There's all kinds of ways you could do it. Your book breaks it down into two sections based on cranial and spinal. So it's the nerves that are coming out of your brain directly and the nerves that are coming out of your spinal cord. And so there are 12 specific nerves, so 12 kind of bundles that head out to certain locations coming from your brain. So this is summarizing the 12. You can see them here listed in Roman numerals. You're going to be summarizing and drawing these in a second. The names that they have, right, olfactory, related to smell, optic, relating to sight, their names match their overall function, right, what they're involved in. Some of them are only sensory, meaning they're only bringing messages towards the brain. Some do both. In fact, most of them do both, right, where they're both sensory and motor. And in one unique case, the accessory over here, it's just only motor that's controlling your neck movements and things like that. And so here's kind of a diagram from your reading. I'm going to have you draw an alternative form of this, where you're going to be drawing a single human face and just showing how the brain connects to the different parts. But again, they've got them Roman numerals naming each one. And again, the point is that these are nerves that are coming directly from the brain. So there's no spinal cord involved here. Not surprisingly, it's control of facial features, right? And our sensory organs, which are collected in our head region, right? It's kind of interesting that you have 4 nerves alone dedicated to your eyes and eye movement. But not surprising when you think about how quickly and efficiently our eyes can move to focus on certain things. And then, you have one nerve for all those other organs. So the spinal cord can be pretty complicated when you get into how the neurons connect. Again, don't get too lost in details here. We're not going to spend too much time on it. What I wish your book did a better job of explaining, though, is that so nerves are always split into 2 categories, right? With the spine, dorsal and ventrals, right? So here you can see the dorsal root nerve versus here's the ventral. They don't do a good job of explaining that dorsal you should always associate with sensory, right? So dorsal is the input. So things are coming in through dorsal, and then they're going out through ventral, right? So I often think ventral, output, motor is a good way to remember that. They have this image as well, kind of showing the same thing, where again, you can see here's our dorsal root and our ventral root. So again, think of dorsal, that's the input, message gets processed, and then gets sent out in motor output there. And you've got these things called ganglia, which are kind of these centers where these transitions occur. And then you have what are called the rami, the dorsal ramus and the central ramus, which are just continuing outwards to their locations. We're going to focus on this, the central ventral ramuses, which are, again, the output messages. What are the nerves that these then go through? And so that is, these collections are referred to as plexuses. So if you ever hear the term plexus, I want you to think of a nerve bundle going outwards from the spine. There are 4 main plexuses that we have: cervical, brachial, lumbar, and sacral. And again, you're going to be making a drawing and summarize these, and basically just showing where they come off of the spine. I mean, not surprisingly, right? You've got a huge nerve collection that comes off of the upper part of your cervical vertebrae. So that's the cervical plexus. Then right at the border between the cervical and thoracic, that's where the brachial comes out. Brachial, you'll see, controls your arm and hand and things like that. Lumbar, not surprisingly, comes from the lower, I'm trying to remember now, down here, the upper part of the lumbar. And then this, the sacral, is associated with that. So again, your textbook doesn't include this diagram of the spine, which I wish they did. But again, you'll be combining those in your own drawing. And again, what do I mean by plexus? I know it's confusing. It's a collection of branching nerves, right? So this is a drawing. Here's the brachial plexus, which is, again, the bundle of nerves that then ends up going down your arm to your hand. So it's controlling all your arm and hand muscles and collecting all the sensory information from that. And again, that tends to be associated with this sort of upper region here of the spine, and so on. And so you'll do a little drawing that'll kind of break that down and organize it a little bit. Any questions or comments right now on that? All right, we are doing pretty good on time. So your next task then is to work on some drawings. We are on tasks to complete step number 4 right now. You'll see there are 2 drawings I'd like you to do, the cranial nerve drawings and then the spinal nerve drawings. So if you click on each of those, it'll take you to an assignment. So here's an example, here's cranial. And usual deal, I've got an example of what you should be drawing, as well as instructions on what to do and reference diagrams you can look at from the book. And that's the same for the spinal one as well. Ultimately, here is what you should end up with. It's going to look silly, but here's my drawing of the cranial nerves. So basically what we're trying to do is show a brain, show a very simple human face. You are welcome to draw more detail if you want. I tried and it looked a little horrifying, so I decided to keep things simple. But basically, you're going to be using the Roman numerals to label the associated places on the face. So you'll see there's like Roman numeral 1 on the nose and Roman numeral 9 on the neck and things like that. And then actually summarize the nerves on the top and use arrows to indicate whether they're sensory, motor, or both. And you'll see that it's all color-coded as well. So if you are able, if you have colored pencils, you can do that. That'd be great. Again, I have a picture of this you can refer to on the assignment. And then here are the spinal ones. So you'll draw a spinal cord. You'll use colors to shade in the different regions and then show what they're associated with, right? So the upper part's associated with head and shoulders, then the arm, then the front leg and thigh, and then the butt and most of the leg. So I'll give you a remainder of class time to work on this. If you want to do it in your sketchbook, that's great, but I honestly, there's a lot of detail in these. I recommend just using a sheet of paper, and then you could fold it and tape that into your sketchbook. But I think bigger is going to be better. Like the more space you have on the paper to do this, that's going to be a little better for you. You're welcome to restart if you need to, or you don't have to match the drawings that I provided perfectly. It's okay if you have to move something or shift something around, that's fine. It's mostly just making sure you've labeled things correctly. That's what I'm going to be looking for when I grade this. So I'll be here listening if you have questions or if you need help, if you're not sure what to do about something. But otherwise, I'm going to time for half an hour, 30 minutes, and we'll come back together to check in. I'm going to check in at the 15-minute mark to make sure we're all doing good. Or